Well, Jonathan, I want to thank you so much for your time for this interview series. I've been a follower of yours for a long time, and uh, what really resonated with me from your work is it just felt so authentic. And it just felt like, I think a lot of people can resonate with your frustrations and they're out in the dating world and just trying to create these authentic connections. And this interview series is geared towards people who are typically classify themselves as people pleasers, or I need approval from others to feel like they're good enough. And I know you talk a lot about self-love. So Jonathan, can you share with us who you are, what you do, and what motivates you to do and share the work that you do?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on your summit. I really appreciate it. So for those who don't know who I am, I'm a dating and relationship coach, predominantly working with women in midlife. And I say midlife is after baby making years and before retirement. So most of my clients are somewhere in the age of 42 to 69, although I work with younger people and I work with older people. Why I specifically focus on that niche is because the predominant population that's over 45, single and looking for love, is divorced. And with divorce comes a lot of different shifts in a person's life. And I say this because at some point, two people are commingled together, and then there's an unraveling of the tapestry, and because of that, we come to the table with a lot of different nuances than when we're in our 20s and 30s. When we're in our 20s and 30s, we're like a blank sheet of paper. So dating in midlife and relationships in midlife are vastly different. And it's not like the narrative that we watched growing up for those of us who are baby boomers or even Gen Xers. It's not like the Brady Bunch where it's just going to be all happy and roses and it's just going to work out, and the biggest issue is going to be the knapsack race that you're having this weekend. That's not real life. And yet that's what we were indoctrinated in. So I like to talk about the reality of the dating, mating, and relating process versus the fantasy. In fact, I say the fantasy because a lot of dating coaches operate from a place of giving unrealistic hope, particularly to women, and then that sets them up for failure. So I like to be blunt, bold. I call my coaching heart-centered, radical honesty. It's direct, a little tough love, a lot of heart, and occasionally I use expletives to enhance a sentence. So I hope it doesn't offend anyone if I do.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'm so glad you mentioned this word fantasy, because a lot of my clients, they come in and they're struggling in their marriage or with their partner, and it's because they're interacting with this idealized version, right, of their partner, and they're like, why can't I get this from them? Why can't I get that from them? Why don't I feel seen? Why don't I feel heard? And it's like they haven't yet, like they're still got the rose-colored glasses on, right? Can you talk a little bit more about like this fantasizing that goes on?
So thank you. And we were indoctrinated with this fantasy, especially if we look back, 50, 70 years ago. So those of us who were raised as baby boomers or Gen X, we were raised by the late bloomer baby boomers or the silent generation. And why I share this is, a lot of times relationships back then were men were the leaders of the process because men were the provider protectors, and women were actually considered second-class citizens. In fact, think back 100 years ago, women just finally got the chance to vote. And even for the next 50 years, just establishing some level of equality was slowly happening. The point I'm making, why is this a fantasy, is because there's this narrative that men were just this chivalrous creatures and all a woman had to do was sit back in her feminine energy and a man would claim them. Well, that's actually not what happened. Mm-hmm. Dating used to happen in a short period of time because two people wanted to have sex together. They got married. And they oftentimes married the wrong person, but they stuck it out because that was the narrative that we grew up with. Okay, so now fast forward to today. Women are far more empowered than ever before. But I believe that women also give their power away to men because they were literally indoctrinated. This biologically, they were indoctrinated in this because men were the provider protectors and women were the nurturers. So on some level, women are stuck in this duality of they're in their empowerment to some degree, far more than ever before in society. And yet imprinting and biology makes them give their power away to men. Now, let me give you an example of giving your power away. It might look like the man is supposed to lead the dating process. The man is supposed to pay for everything. And then when the relationship ends, it's like, why did he end it with me? It's all focused on him instead of self. So the narrative that I lean into for my audience is the recognition of something called self-love. Now, self-love is a turn off to some people. So let me just make it simple. Self-love means self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-reliance, self-discipline. It's all those self words. In fact, it's one of the, and the reason why I actually wrote a book about this, I don't know if you can, I know it's backwards in the camera. What the heck is self-love anyway?
Love it.
It's a journey of personal development, self-help, and spiritual work. So we actually lean into our empowerment specifically in relationships as well. So now what was the question again? Because I kind of went off on my tangent there.
Well, you led right into a topic that, my next question was talking about the self-love. I feel like this word is thrown around today. Like you said, like, it's like, oh, let me go get my nails done. Let me go get my hair done. And really true self-love, right? I'm curious, like in your own words.
Oh, by the way, let me jump in on this, and I apologize for interrupting you. So so folks, manicures, pedicures, massages, that's self-care, okay? That's self-care. Now, we sometimes use the word self-love, but I want to distinguish between the two because self-love, self-care is taking care of your physical body, and that's hugely important. Self-love is taking care of your emotional body, if you will. Because here's the thing, the number one emotional health issue facing most every human being is I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, and I'm not likable. I want to repeat that. I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not likable. This is true of men and women alike, okay? And dating triggers that wound like nobody's business. I'm sorry to say. If we've gone, and I want you to think about this for a second, you're communicating with someone online, you talk a little bit, you build a little bit of familiarity with one another, you go see, you meet for a date, you have another date, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, one or both people ghost or disappear, okay? One person ghosts or disappear. Well, then all of a sudden we internalize it. What did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? And we're so hyper focused on what's wrong that it beats us up emotionally. So self-love is shoring up your emotional cortex, emotional foundation, excuse me, so that when something doesn't go your way, you're not beating yourself up. Yeah. And the sad part is most humans are suffering on the inside. So then take the dating narrative. Men are supposed to be this way and women are supposed to do this. Well, a lot of supposed to is in the dating realm and you have to recognize that most human beings are flawed. We're suffering on the inside. We have negative patterns and limiting beliefs or traumas in our past that makes it difficult to establish deep roots in a relationship. So yeah, I just threw out a lot here. Why I'm sharing this with everybody is I prefer folks taking more of a compassionate approach to dating, a more compassionate approach. And if you haven't read the book, If the Buddha Dated, this takes out all the bullshit gender narratives and allows people to start dating from a spiritual perspective. And what I mean by spirit, from their heart, and not the gender expectations that cause a lot of the frustration in the dating process. Now, I want to shift gears for everybody for a second, because I really want to lean into one of the challenges in dating today. Yeah. Is that these days we're meeting total strangers. And what did your parents tell you growing up about strangers? Tell me.
Watch out.
Yeah, watch out. Don't talk to strangers. So we already have this bias around strangers, right? Watch out. Now, why I'm sharing this with you, think back 70 years ago, 100 years ago. Most likely everybody you ever, back then, most people dated people that were in their town, their village, their tribe, or maybe their workplace. So there was a level of familiarity. In fact, you knew their friends, they knew your friends, they knew your family, you knew their family. And even if you were maybe an outlier, there were so many people in your community that knew each other that it already felt safe to some degree. And most likely, if you grew up in the same small town, you shared the same values and your lifestyles were blendable. And for folks watching, or I'll share this in a second. So something called my relationship iceberg. But what I'm here to say is when you're meeting a total stranger, it doesn't feel safe to be vulnerable. And yet vulnerability is how we establish intimacy with another person. So this is the tricky game in the early stages of dating, that very few people are being vulnerable with one another to create that intimate connection. So they require on chemistry as the driving force. Now, folks, I know this is going to be backwards, but I want everyone to, if you can see this, it's called my relationship iceberg. I know it's probably backwards on the screen, but I want I'll just explain it to everybody. So above the waterline is attraction. And you can see the tip of the iceberg says chemistry. And below the waterline, and you see how big this is shared values, blendable lifestyles, and emotional maturity. And that says compatibility. So does everyone got that picture in your head? Okay, hopefully you can see that.
I love it.
So,
Love it.
So why I'm sharing this is we put so much pressure on chemistry as leading the dating process. And we oftentimes think chemistry is love when it's merely chemicals being released in your body, mostly dopamine, that makes us feel something for another human being. Okay, and there's oxytocin in there, and there's estrogen and testosterone and serotonin, but mostly when it's amped up on chemistry, it's dopamine. Doesn't mean it's real, it's just a chemical similar to, I'm going to inject myself with crack cocaine, or actually I'll smoke some crack cocaine. That's what you're experiencing. So then you start engaging a relationship, realizing that you don't share the same values, your lifestyles aren't blendable, and worse, this person lacks a level of emotional maturity. And I know a lot of women are going, well, men are emotionally unavailable, men are emotionally immature. Ladies, you are equally emotionally unavailable and emotionally immature. And I say this as a single man out in the dating realm. The only difference is women are more predisposed to want to be in a relationship because they give their power away to men, like I shared earlier.
Yeah.
Okay?
Jeez, Jonathan, can you talk more about that? Like, I think we hear this concept of giving our power away, and what does that look like when we're giving our power away?
Well, I happen to have a sheet on that says 7 ways women give their power away.
Yeah.
So, number 1, the relationship is on his terms. You abandon your standards and your boundaries. It's all, and you're on pins and needles all the time. I'm afraid to talk because he'll break up with me. That's giving your power away. Number 2, and I said, number 2, you're afraid to speak your truth with him. In my book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? Chapter 1 is speak your truth. Just do it with kindness.
Yes. And I love that emphasis on kindness, right? It doesn't have to blow up, right? A lot of people anticipate, right, that catastrophization, that things are just going to blow up and end. And often this is just an illusion in our minds, right? And so, doing it with love, doing it from like a heart-centered place.
Even chapter 9 in my book, if it's sincere and from the heart, you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. You could totally fuck up a great relationship if you're coming from fear, anger, judgment, criticism, contempt, even stonewalling. That's what John Gottman talks about, the 4 horsemen to the apocalypse, is criticism, contempt, stonewalling, and defensiveness. Yes, you can ruin a great relationship if you're coming from a nasty place, but if you're coming from your heart, you can't ruin a good relationship. You can only ruin a bad relationship. And by the way, it's not ruining, it's called, saving yourself more years of pain. So let me go through the other ways women give their power away. When the relationship ends, They focus all on the guy. They're hyper focused on him instead of self. That's an example of giving power away. You're always waiting for him to initiate contact. And I know all the female coaches say men are supposed to pursue, men are supposed to pursue. Men at midlife, we're not as good at, most men are good guys, they're bad daters. Both people should be pursuing each other like driving down a road in a 2-lane street mutually together.
Love it. Yeah.
Number 5, you stop doing your pre-relationship life. In other words, you stop doing the things you did before because you're hyper focused on him instead of, having an equal balanced life. Number 6, you're feeling like you can't live without him. Jonathon, this is the only man I've ever had chemistry with, and we talked at an emotional level. Well, he broke up with you. If that's the only man, then go ahead and crawl in a cave and don't ever date again. Here's the thing, ladies, when you believe that this guy is the only guy that'll make you happy, you're giving your power to him.
Yeah.
And lastly, you think, but this piggybacks like this. You think he's the only person that will ever have chemistry with. So it piggybacks on the one before. So these are just some examples of how women give their power away.
Yeah. And these are also blocks to emotional intimacy, right? There's a book I read called Games People Play. Jonathon, I don't know if you've heard of this book, but there's a line in there that says, in all realness, most people are not able to really create intimacy with another person because they're too busy playing games. And
that's where this book was invented, the rules. Ladies, this book ruined it for you because it's temporary game playing. And it's game playing that temporarily hooks the wrong guy. You temporarily hook the wrong guy thinking, but you've hooked him because the rules works. Again, it works for the wrong people and it only works temporarily. It does not work long-term because game playing doesn't work. Authenticity, like in the book, If the Buddha Dated, that's how you attract a great relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. One of the games, I know, me, myself as a recovering people pleaser, I know one of the games I can relate to is, look how hard I've tried, right? The martyr.
Oh
look,
my God.
I've done this for you. I've done this for you. And you can't do this for me. And it turns into like emotional blackmail. And I'm sure a lot of people watching this can resonate with like, look, I work to earn this and I want to earn love. I want to earn your attention. And there's this constant, it's like this hamster wheel, right? Trying to get from the other person.
I think Marianne Williamson talks about that. Marianne Williamson wrote the book, A Return to Love. And in this audio, this is the CD version, she talks about that people pleaser is actually being a narcissistic form of seeking validation. Yeah. So you give under the premise that it's love, but you're doing it because you desire validation, which is actually a narcissistic behavior and not a genuine loving behavior, because a healthy, emotionally healthy person gives love from their overflow and not as a way to get love. Mm-hmm. And the classic example is the minute they go, I gave, and they gave me nothing. That's narcissism. Mm-hmm. Because love is simply giving. It's an expression of giving. It's not an expectation of receiving. Now, a relationship is a whole different ballgame. This is where oftentimes women get confused because love and relationships aren't necessarily the same thing. And what I mean to say is, it doesn't necessarily, you can love someone, but you may not be compatible with one another to be in a relationship. Going back to my iceberg, there's a lot more moving parts for a relationship to actually work. And love is just the icing on the cake. So that's where a lot of times I believe women hyper focus on love when it's, do we share the same values? Are our lifestyles blendable? And is this person or am I an emotional grown-up to actually be in relationship? And I can tell you 80% of human beings are very emotionally stunted or have weak emotional skills to be in relationship. Doesn't necessarily mean they can't be in a relationship, but their skills are actually very weak, particularly in the area of communication. And this is why I continually recommend the book to everybody. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Purchase this book so you can learn how to communicate in a way that you can be seen, heard, and understood. And I got to tell you something, ladies, you all think you're good at communication. You are just as equally as bad, because oftentimes you vomit communication, and not necessarily in a way that we can hear and see you. But just because you're vomiting it doesn't necessarily mean, we got to sift through the pony through the shit.
Yeah. Oh, Jonathan, like I am just getting so filled up from this conversation alone. A lot of people, especially watching this, right, who are self-proclaimed people pleasers, or I need approval from others. This is where they trip, right? Is like, well, I am communicating, I'm saying things, and I'm still not getting my needs met. And it's all about, right, it's really all about being able to communicate effectively in a, I love that word, non-violent way, non-aggressive way.
Yes.
So it doesn't come off like a threat to that other person and they dismiss and disregard. And, as we wrap up here, because I know we could talk about, hang about and talk about this all day long. I want to hear, like, what message do you have for these men and women who, maybe who are like, their number one goal is like, well, I'm just so used to being nice. I want to be nice. And if I'm nice, I get what I want. You talked earlier about, having more self-compassion. What do you feel like is really missing for these people so that they can, find that love on the outside as well as on the inside and come from that place of fullness? And maybe that's also starting to tune in with your own work and your podcast and your YouTube channel. But what message do you have for these people?
Sure. Well, God, I could spend an hour on this, but I'll try to do this in a couple minutes. So I want to, one of my messages to my audience is the understanding that the fantasy way a lot of relationships are what's the word I'm looking for? Projected out there, if you will, isn't real. And what I mean to say, the whole chivalrous romantic sense. I want to first off share with everyone, romance should begin once you're in a relationship, not as a precursor to being in a relationship. And I say this because romance reminds me of what Chris Rock says in one of his comedy skits. He goes, we oftentimes show up in the beginning of dating as the ambassador of our best selves. Okay. So I'm only saying save the romance until you're in a relationship. So now what do you do before you're in a relationship? I want to invite everybody to be intentional, Get crystal clear on who you are and what do you want out of a relationship. And not from see, a lot of times people say, I want a relationship. And they're like, well, what does that mean? Or let me give you another example. I have women coming to me, Jonathan, I'm in a relationship with a guy and I want more commitment. I'm like, great. What does that look like for you? Well, Jonathan, I just want more commitment out of the guy. Great. What does that look like for you? But Jonathan, I just want more commitment. Ladies, you say the words, but if you don't put context to what that means, how is he ever going to know this? So be crystal clear on who you are. What are you looking for in a relationship? And then here's the key in the dating process. Interrogate each other. Yeah, I know you've been told don't interview people. It's the opposite. You want to interrogate each other. Yeah. In fact, you can do this in a lighthearted, fun way. I actually have put together 20 deep questions that I like to ask. And it's something I can do on the phone. I simply say, hey, you know what? If we want to explore something together, do you mind if we spend the next few minutes just asking each other some deeper questions to see if it makes sense going out on a date? Like, but Jonathan, that's going to disrupt the masculine and feminine energy and all the magic fairy dust that we need to make a relationship work. Pre-qualify your prospect. And if you need help with that, that's my area of expertise. I help women what I call radical honesty, and it's pre-qualifying your prospect. I help women design the questions they need to ask right from the get-go to determine compatibility, shared values, and how to vet for emotional maturity, because here's the real hang-up that happens most of the time. You have chemistry, but you lack values. You have chemistry and values, but your lifestyles aren't blendable. You have chemistry, shared values, and your lifestyles are blendable, but they lack emotional maturity, the foundational piece to be in relationships. So I teach you how to vet for emotional maturity. Folks, if you're not being intentional from the get-go, I just want you to think of this. You go on one date, you have a good time, it doesn't go anywhere. You meet another guy, you have 1 or 2 dates, you have a good time, it doesn't go anywhere. You go on the third date, you have a terrible time, and then you feel discouraged. You go on another date, you feel terrible time, it's too discouraged. After you find yourself 50 dates going, oh my God, dating sucks. Well, imagine this, if you ask a lot of better questions, you could avoid a lot of heartache, and you'll be actually using the law of attraction to draw in the right person for you. So that's my invitation for everybody.
Yes.
In my long-winded way of sharing it.
Yeah, well, what I'm hearing is like, instead of trying to go out there and control the process and try and fit that square piece into a round hole, right? It's just about like, hey, if you just lean into yourself and who you are and what you really want deep down, like let that unravel in front of you, let that come to you, and it will, right? Just like everything else you have in your life is with you and sticks with you because it's supposed to be there. It just fits with you. It fits with your goals, with what you want. And this being intentional, be this everywhere in life, with your health, with your, what you put into your body, with how you want to spend your day, with who you want to spend it with, right? Like what you want your life to look like, being intentional. Wow, like this concept I learned in my late 20s, and my life has changed ever since. So Jonathon, thank you so much for sharing these insights. I know they're going to be life-changing for others as they've been life-changing for me. And we're going to include a link to, I know you have a free gift for this audience, the 5 qualities men seek in a soulmate, which women, oh my gosh, if you're struggling with this, if you feel like you're trying to earn love, you're trying to please, you're trying to, run this hamster wheel for a really, deep, intimate relationship, check out this gift. Jonathon, can you talk a little bit more about this gift?
Well, I want to say something about the gift to everybody. I know a lot of dating advice might seem like it's all about you have to change for the guy, and that can be very frustrating. The reality is women purchase relationship books tenfold greater than men. So the reality is you are the leaders of the relationship process, okay? Now, here's the thing. Men are trainable. And actually, we're easily trainable. And once you've trained us, you will be much happier. So I know that doesn't sound exciting because I know you all want men to come fully trained, but here's the thing. When you train him your way, he's going to be perfect for you. So by the 5 qualities men seek in a soulmate gives you some general understanding of how men operate and gives you some guidance of how you can direct the relationship process to your benefit. And by the way, women of the past used to be masters at this, okay? They recognize my mother, there's a picture of my mother and father. I once asked my dad, what's the secret to relationship success? And he said, your mother doing whatever I told her to do. And then I asked my mom, what's the secret relationship success? And she said, having your father believed he was in charge of the relationship. When you take ownership, my mother was in charge of my father like nobody's business, and all my siblings would agree. It doesn't sound very sexy, but they were married 66 years and very happy because she was in charge of her destiny. And that's my invitation for all of you.
Amazing. Wow. I'm so excited. Like I said, we'll put a link to this gift below this video where you can check it out. Also, Jonathon, go ahead and share your website. If people are interested in working with you, they want to find out more about you, your work, or even coaching with you, where can they go?
Sure. So my website is jonathanaslay.com, just like my name appears there. In fact, when you go to my website, there's a link to my YouTube channel. I got over 500 videos on there. I have a podcast with over 150 podcast episodes on there. And then if you want to learn about working with me or even checking out my private group, go to my website, jonathanaslay.com.
Beautiful. I'm telling you, all viewers watching, if you are in this category, you're struggling to find that deep intimacy. You feel like you have to be nice, you have to wear that smile. You're maybe too afraid to really be vulnerable and connect and to just really be yourself. And maybe you feel like you have to work for love and for attention and for appreciation. Do not check out Jonathon's work. It's life-changing. One of the best leaders in the field, I think. So click the link below, check out all this goodness, and Jonathon, we'll talk very soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again.